there have been recent comments by the UK Prime Minister David Cameron that have been a matter of great deal of media interest. What's your personal opinion on the statement that he made?
Well, my first response would be that the war on terror began somewhere in 2001. This is 9 years on, and my question is this: that has this realization come to the people in the West after 9 years? If all that what he says is true, my question would be: what has the West been doing for the 9 years? Has it not been saying this to Pakistan? Why did it have to go public on it? Secondly, I would say that there are things that friends say to one another in secret, even though they may be very hard, and even though they need to be said. They're said within the confines of the four walls. Saying it in a country like India that Pakistan has problems with doesn't help at all. He perhaps has his reasons for why he said what he said, but it's not helpful. As you know, that within Pakistan itself there are two groups. There is one group that says we shouldn't be supporting Western superpowers, and there is another group that says that yes, we should be supporting them because we want to rid the land of such terrorists. Saying what David Cameron says only gives a bit more of power to those people who say, are these your friends? So I think that perhaps there was a lot more zeal in what he said, perhaps a little less wisdom.
Would this statement be perhaps true, in your opinion, that Afghanistan has received support from elements in Pakistan, and that these anti-Western groups are providing that support for people who are combating Western troops?
I think that as various things have been come to light, certainly there are some elements that would support groups like the Taliban in Pakistan and outside Pakistan. Keep in mind that these groups were first formed by the Pakistanis to fight the Soviets, and now they're being told that they are now our enemies. And so everybody is not going to join that bandwagon, no matter how much we'd like them to join that bandwagon. There also are religious links over there. There are probably people within the Pakistan security apparatus who may believe the same thing, maybe passionately believe the same things that the Taliban believe, and so getting them to change overnight is going to take a lot of time. We created them, now we want to destroy them. So that's going to be a problem. And of course, a lot of this goes back to the very beginnings of Pakistan, where there's certainly, even up to today, there are people who say that this nation was a secular nation, was meant to become a secular nation as a homeland for Muslims. And there's another group that says no, that this was meant to be an Islamic nation. And there has always been this clash and this lack of identity from the very beginning of Pakistan. And therefore to come and say something like what was said is simply not recognizing history, not recognizing the fabric of the Pakistani mindset and makeup, certainly not understanding all the past, all what's happened in even the recent history. Therefore, it's to that I say that it almost arms your enemies by saying, see, this is what they think of you. This is what they really, really think of you. Friends don't talk negatively about each other in public.
You say that Pakistan has a sort of level of ambiguity as to what it was intended to become. Where does that ambiguity come from historically?
You see, right at the very beginning, Mr. Jinnah, who fought for the independence of Pakistan, if you look at some of his speeches are very secular. At the same time, it was a nation that came into being because it was a homeland for the Muslims. The great tragedy perhaps was that he died 1 year after Pakistan came into being, or just approximately 1 year after he came into being, and therefore things were not able to really set in the way he would have wanted them. And so even up to today, there are people who would repeat some of his speeches that actually clearly point towards Pakistan being a secular nation. And there are people who would clearly go back to some of the things that happened in the earlier constitution, the Objectives Resolution, whereby then Pakistan became an Islamic Republic. And this clash, this lack of identity, has been something that we've struggled with all during our time as a nation together, and still struggle with.
Pakistan is, by its definition, an Islamic Republic. What differences do you notice when, in your travels, you come to different countries with, say, a secular constitution?
In Pakistan, as I've said before, one of the positives is that when I go to, let's say, Western countries especially, the difference I notice that in Pakistan everybody talks about God. God is very much part of their day-to-day conversation. You don't find it sometimes in Western countries, and sometimes people are almost, in the West, people are almost afraid to even talk about God. On the other hand, in Pakistan, some things can be attributed to God that are not necessarily from God or of God, and that's a difficult situation to sometimes live with. For example, fatalism is something that, oh, this happened because God willed it to, especially when it comes to tragedies and things like that. And that's very difficult coming to hear, especially as I've come to know God as a gracious God and as a forgiving God. Suddenly we'll hear of a tragedy and say, oh, this is what God willed, and that's very difficult to take living in Pakistan.
Could you see any positives if it were the other way around? So you said that in secular societies it wasn't the case that people were very open to talk about God, and that would obviously be a negative. Could you think of any positives, or do you know of any positives that you feel would be a good thing to see maybe in Pakistan?
I think one of the things that Western society or Western education has given to its people is this whole realm of reason and the whole realm of talking through things and discussing things and not letting emotions come in it. In Pakistan, religion is a highly emotive subject, and when you talk about religion, people can get very emotional about it and therefore stop thinking about it. Whereas in the West, you can talk about religion, and you can walk out of the discussion unscattered, as I might say. That might not be possible in Pakistan.
So you'd feel possibly safer discussing things, issues of religion, because you wouldn't expect things to get as passionate.
That's correct, especially when you're discussing religion, or when you're discussing issues that you look at differently from the other person. That's when it's a bit more safer to talk about it in the West.
In the news there are frequent reports, possibly, I don't want to lead your answer here, but possibly related to what you've just said about passions boiling over. There are frequent reports of suicide bombings, various acts of violence. How has that impacted you in your everyday life?
I think one of the biggest problems is that when you read day by day of loss of life, somebody blowing himself up and a number of people dying as a result of it, the greatest danger is to become hard-hearted to the whole thing. The greatest danger is to shrug your shoulders and say, okay, one more suicide bomber, or one more bomb, 30 plus more people dead, in a teeming population. You can just shrug your shoulders and say, oh, there's still a lot more left alive. And that, I think, is the greatest temptation I would face as a Christian, because a loss of life is a loss of life, and to remain compassionate about families who now have lost perhaps a breadwinner, about children who would have lost a father, to remain compassionate day by day. I can't feel exactly as they would feel, but to even have some kind of a feeling is the biggest temptation. It's easy to join the majority and say, oh, one more gone. And to even condemn it in the highest possible way, but to have no feeling about it. And that's the most difficult thing.
Something that's just come to mind, and sort of an interesting question. Obviously, the core of Christianity is the fact that Jesus came and it was a mission given to him that he would die for his people. The idea of emulating that standard, could you see that as being somehow tempting to elevate themselves, or do you think that these people's motives are born out of a different area?
I think one of the things, especially with young people across the world, and a lot of these people are young who blow themselves up, they want to have a reason to live, and they want to live for some cause that is higher than themselves, and a cause that will demand all of themselves. And that's very attractive. A cause that says, look, we are ready to give our lives so that the cause may go forward, is very, very tempting to young people. And that's one of the things. They are led to believe that they love their faith so much, and that the other people, whoever they are attempting, who they end up blowing up with, are a danger to their faith, and therefore in order to remove that danger, they've got to give up their lives and also take other lives, is something that's very attractive to them. Of course, that does not only happen within the religious system, it happens also, as they fight the war on terror. They look, or first, the Western forces are demonized, and they are seen to as being evil, and this is a war between good and evil. This is a war where evil, as is portrayed, may be very stronger and well equipped, but because we are on the side of good, because we are on the side of God, then we'll ultimately win. And that's the sort of David and Goliath being repeated again and again and again and again. That ultimately we'll win this war, and that's what keeps them going. That's what keeps a steady stream of people joining the forces to give their lives up so that they can blow up many more. Now, there are other reasons, of course there are other reasons, but this is something that they hold on to very, very strongly.